Thanks very much for being here today. And I especially want to thank Deborah Shelby of Jericho, James P. Sheldon Dean of Charlotte, Tamara Smith of Burlington, and Holly Smith of Essex Junction. You Smiths are not related, I guess. No. To discuss what is an extraordinarily important issue and an issue that will be taken up by the Senate tonight and this week. And that is the abuse of credit card holders all over this country, and something that is disturbing deeply millions and millions of Americans and many people in our own state of Vermont. Just as an example, a few weeks ago, I sent an email out to my email list, of which I am assuming these 4 Vermonters are part of, and I said, very simply, tell me what is happening to you in terms of the credit card companies that you're dealing with. In 3 days, we got close to 1,000 responses, many from Vermont, but from all over this country. And what we ended up doing is publishing those responses in a book that we call Enough is Enough: How Credit Card Companies Are Abusing Americans, Letters from Vermont and the Nation. And the responses that we got were just overwhelming, and they were heartbreaking. They were stories of people who said, you know, I've had a credit card for years, and every single month I pay my bills on time, and then all of a sudden I'm seeing my credit card interest rates going from whatever, 6%, 8%, to 29%, to 30%. And that is outrageous. It is unfair. I called up the credit card company to find an explanation. What did I do wrong? There was no explanation. The answer was, we did it because we can do it. And what people were doubly disturbed about is that these banks who are charging these outrageously high interest rates are precisely the financial institutions that are receiving hundreds of billions of dollars in bailout money from the taxpayers of this country. So working people are putting money into these banks, and these banks are then saying, thank you very much, I'm going to double or triple your interest rates. Now, this week, the Senate is going to deal with credit cards. The President has been talking about it on several occasions. I believe what we are going to see is something that will improve the situation. What we will see is an end to the solicitations that credit card companies send out all over this country, would say to people, sign up for our credit card because you're going to have low interest rates, and then forgetting to mention that on page 4 in very small print, they can charge any rates at any time, which is, of course, what they are doing. I think what you will probably see in this legislation is an end to the ability of these companies to retroactively raise the rates that people have agreed to with them. And that is an important step forward, something that I've been working on for many, many years. But in my view, we've got to go even further than that. I think that when credit card companies are charging Americans 20, 25, 30% interest rates, what you are talking about is usury. What you're talking about is usury, something that should not be allowed in this country. And many, many years ago, states, Vermont, many other states, had what we called usury rates. There were laws at how high interest rates could be charged to the people of our country. What happened back in 1978 is a Supreme Court decision essentially made those usury rates by the states null and void, and it said that if a company goes to a state that does not have usury rates, like Delaware, like South Dakota, and establishes their business there, other states cannot prohibit those companies from charging any interest rates they want, and that is what we have seen. So I think we need a national usury rate, and what we are proposing is to do for the private financial institutions what has existed for credit unions for some 30 years, and that is 15% max. Under certain circumstances, it can go higher. And in fact, credit unions have done pretty well living under those regulations. So that's where we are right now. This is a huge issue. People are very, very upset about it. We hope to have some action this week. And what I wanted to do, and I'm just delighted that we have 4 people from the state of Vermont who want to talk very briefly about their experiences. And let me first introduce Deborah Shelby, who is from Jericho. Deborah?
Well, I've been a Discover card member since '94. And I've been on auto payment through my bank account for the last 5 years. And in December, they said that I was late with a payment, which I'm not sure exactly how that occurred. But when I contacted them in January, when I noticed that my interest rate was at 29% when it had been at 13, they said that there was nothing they could do about it, but they could maybe lower it down to 21. And I said, don't you think that this is highway robbery? Can I speak to a supervisor? There was no supervisor to talk to. I was given a mailing address, to which they have done nothing of my communications with them. So I've stopped using their card, and I've refused services from them since then.
You know, like many people are carrying a balance on a number of cards these days, and with the lower interest rates that are in the marketplace in general, it's a good idea to call the people that you owe money to, your creditors, and ask for a better interest rate. So we did this. We called everybody who was holding our credit cards. One bank was good enough to reduce its rate from nearly 30% down to 13%. Another bank knocked off 2% off the rate they were charging us. But when we called Bank of America, I called them about a card that I've had since 1974. It's an account that was my first credit card that I ever got down at Vermont National in Wilmington, Vermont, and I've had this account all these years. And they said not only were they not going to reduce my interest rate, they were actually going to cut my available credit within a few $100s of my current balance, effectively rendering the card unusable for large purchases or emergency services. And at the same time, thereby increasing my percentage of my available balance that was used for credit and decreasing my credit worthiness through no fault of my own. We always pay on time. We always pay more than minimum balances. Not only this, but also my wife's card, which has since also wound up in the hands of Bank of America. They decided to do the same thing for her card and reduce the available balance on that. And a third card that we had through Bank of America, they raised the interest rate more than 11 percentage points to almost 26 if we ever use it again. So I mean, personally, I find this insulting and demeaning behavior, and I have to wonder about the business sense of a company that thinks it's a good idea to so systematically abuse its best customers, its longest-term customers. In the 35 years that I've been using these cards, they've processed probably hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of business, and now suddenly they want to treat us this way. I think it's time for these abuses to stop.
I signed up with MBNA 5 years ago, and I was given a 7.9 interest rate, but it was fixed for life as long as I adhered to the terms. When Bank of America purchased MBNA, I called to make sure that that 7.9 interest rate was still in effect, and they assured me it was. Whenever I got an offer in the mail, I called just to make sure that that 7.9 fixed interest rate was in effect, and I was told all along, yes. I received a letter in early April telling me that my interest rate was going up to 12.9% for any future purchases. I could keep the 7.9, pay down my small balance, but any future purchases, it would be set 12.9, and it would affect the small balance that I had.
Stories that you're hearing today, there are thousands of people in the state, frankly, who tell exactly the same story. And what you're hearing is arbitrariness, paid back bills on time, and yet, for no fault of my own, my rates were doubled, or in some cases even tripled. Try to communicate with the company, no response whatsoever. Misleading information, promised a fixed rate, suddenly it becomes a variable rate. Incredible dishonesty, not the way major banks should be functioning. And again, all of this takes place within the context that everybody in this room are bailing out these very same institutions. And in addition to that, these large banks are receiving virtually interest-free loans from the Fed. So we're bailing them out, they're receiving zero interest loans from the Fed, and then they're charging people in Vermont and around this country 15, 20, 30% interest rates. So that's got to stop. I think you will see some progress in Washington this week. The President feels strongly about it. I think we should probably go further than the legislation that's on the floor and pass a national usury rate, which says enough is enough. You may not ever charge the American people 25, 30%, or even more for payday loans, by the way, which can go to 100, 200%. So that's where we're at right now.